Welcome to Absolutely Abundant, a podcast for soul line creatives. This is your host, Julie Goetzinger, and this is episode 21, Setting Boundaries with Nazie Spurrier. I am so excited to have Nazie here today. Nazie is a psychotherapist and an intuitive lifestyle and manifestation coach. And she's also one of my free to fly clients. And it's been so much fun watching her coaching business just completely take off and grow. And I'm so honored to have you with us here today, Nazie. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! Well, let me read to you a little bit more about Nazie. So, Nazie works with clients to empower them, help them to set boundaries, make more money, and clear blocks or sabotages that are keeping them from living their dream life. She considers herself as more than a therapist because of her intuitive gifts, and more than a coach because of her over 13 years of education and experience working with trauma in the human mind. What an amazing combination those two things are. Really,
it's been so fun merging them together over the past year or so. So yeah, it's been awesome.
I love it. And what inspired you to start into the coaching business? I know you did psychotherapy for many years and then now you're a
Right.
coach as well. So what inspired
Yeah.
that transition?
So I think honestly, I have to say it was the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, all of my work was in person. I had people coming into my office. My audience was, or audience, my scope was really just the people who lived close enough to drive to my office every week and work with me in person. And then the pandemic happened. Everything became virtual. I started doing telehealth. And then I realized that, wow, like the world is so big all of a sudden. My world can be so big. And with therapy, there's a lot of restrictions. You can only work in the states that you're licensed in. Whereas, for better or worse, there are no restrictions in coaching, which means anybody can be a coach, which means But for me, it was great because I have the experience, I have the education, I know what I'm talking about. So
Yes.
it was a very quick and easy transition to just jump into coaching to be able to reach more people, people who don't have necessarily a mental health issue, but we all have work to do. We all have things we need to work on and grow, and personal development is so huge. So being able to be a part of that as well.
Love it. Love it. And what caused you to focus a lot on setting boundaries? So, what is it about that you're really passionate about teaching?
I love that for a couple of reasons. One, my personal experience. I have been working on my boundaries for a very long time, and I feel like there's been this evolution. In my opinion, it went slower than it should have. I didn't necessarily have the support and the help to be able to push me to set firmer boundaries, to really, step out of people pleasing and some of those other behaviors that I was doing. And I did it eventually, but it took me a lot longer than it needed to. And I want to kind of collapse time for other people that, like, we can make these changes in your life and you don't have to take years and years of working through it to figure it out. The other piece is that as a therapist, as a helper, I see a lot of people in our industry, in the therapy world, in the healing world. We want to help people, and we're kind and we're compassionate and we're empathic and we want to be there for people, but it often comes at a cost, right? And we don't always have firm boundaries because of things that have happened in our past, and we end up getting taken advantage of. And I just want to help other people who are kind of in the same industry as we are to realize that it doesn't have to be this way. Like, you can set these firm boundaries for yourself and for other people to make your life easier.
Wow, I love that. Chills on that. Yes. More of that, please. Helping the
Right.
helpers. Because my
Yeah.
sister speaks for me. It has taken me a long time to learn boundary setting, and I'm still learning it. And I still
Right.
slip into that people pleasing, wanting everyone to be happy. I want everyone to feel good. And, it's not our job to fix anyone else. Healing is a
Right.
personal journey. And as a guide, coach, and therapist, we can help them and shine the light on what wants to be healed. But ultimately, the choice is theirs to do the work. So
Exactly.
I love the work that you're doing. And what does people pleasing look like as like a real world example? Like, so we can,
Right.
really relate to that as like, what does that even look like? How does that
Yeah.
manifest?
Yeah. So it can manifest in a lot of different ways. There's the obvious ways where it's like you are just kind of a yes person, right? You're just always telling people yes. You're going out of your way to do anything and everything for everyone else. And those are the really obvious ways that it shows up. And people are usually sort of aware that they are like that, right? That they're just willing to kind of like, oh, you need this? Okay, I got you, like whatever. And they're just constantly like saying yes. But it also shows up in a lot of subtle ways as well, in ways that we don't necessarily realize, where it's more about comfort. So if somebody else is upset, I'm uncomfortable because they're upset. So I'm going to try to help them to feel better, not really to help them feel better, but really to help me feel better. Right. So there's that codependency that comes into play in these situations where it's like, in order for me to be comfortable, I need to make these other people comfortable. And so really owning the fact that I'm doing these things not for others, I'm doing them to make myself feel okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Truth bomb there, truth
Right.
bomb. Because we want to just be like, oh, I just want them to feel good. But no, we actually want to feel good.
Right. The real, people pleasing is a very selfish and manipulative thing, and people don't want to hear that. And I feel bad saying that because it's not on purpose, right? It's not
Yes.
conscious. It's not like they're sitting here like, manipulating, like, ooh, I'm going to do this. Like, it's not that, but it is a manipulation, right? It is that thing of, we're trying to control how other people feel about us, right?
Wow.
We're trying to control whether somebody likes me or not. And
Mm.
that's a manipulation, And so being honest about that and really like owning it, and then stepping back and looking like, why do I feel like I need to do that? Like, what's lacking for me that I need this person to like me, because there's always the deeper work that needs to be done there.
And that's exactly my question is, when does this start? When do we, learn to become people pleasers? Why? And
Mm-hmm.
earlier on in life, like, why do we choose that?
Right. Yeah. And it is very much early on in life. It's, a lot of times in our family of origin, or, in childhood, we probably had a parent or a caregiver or somebody, an adult important in our lives, that couldn't handle our emotions. Right. So when you're a kid, something goes wrong, you freak out, you cry, you scream, you whatever. If you had a parent who couldn't handle that in either way, whether they were like, you got to shut up and they would shut you down immediately, or they would do too much and they would try to coddle you and they would do whatever they could to get you to stop.
Mm.
When you have those two extremes, you learn very quickly that this is not serving me. This is not giving me the love and the affection that I need. And so I'm going to monitor how I'm showing up. And I'm going to make sure that I'm not making this other person uncomfortable. And it really teaches that codependency of, I'm not okay unless you're okay. Right.
Wow.
So it's like, and as children, we need our caregivers to be okay. Right. Like, we look at our parents as um, godlike almost, right? I mean, like, we have biologically, we need to connect to them. We're looking to them to set the tone. And when they are showing us that this is unacceptable, then we have to find ways to adapt and make sure that we're still getting that connection with them.
Wow. And how does this translate into, adulthood? Let's say, if you're dating, or, like, if you felt that from an early age of, I need to do
Hmm.
this to please you, how can that manifest in a dating environment in adulthood?
Right. And then, yeah, that's where you have people who are not really, really living for themselves. They're always doing stuff for other people. They're always considering the other person's comfort and feelings and everything before their own, and you have the people who kind of grow up with like kind of like a martyr complex in a way of like, well, I need to do all these things, or I need to like, if I don't do this, then everything's going to fall apart, right? They become kind of like the perfectionist sometimes as well, because it's that thing of like, I need to be perfect for you to love me. It's
Mm.
very conditional, right? It turns into this very conditional relationship. And it's problematic for both parties, because the thing is like, the person who's doing the people pleasing, who doesn't have the strong boundaries, they're miserable because they're not really doing what they want. They're just doing what they think the other person wants. And then the other person is kind of being misled because they don't know. right? You're basically like lying to this other person saying that this is how you want things to be when it's not the truth. And so it's not a real, genuine, honest relationship. And that's not always the fault of the partner who's maybe taking advantage of the people pleasing because they just, that's all they know.
Wow. Oh, and how do we heal this? If we identify with this story of,
Right.
making everyone else comfortable first, or that martyrdom. Nobody wants to admit that they're the martyr,
Right.
but when we look at it as like, oh yeah, I liked everyone else to be comfortable and it's at the expense of us. Like, how do we heal that?
Right. I think what you need to do is, there needs to be a look at our self-worth, a look at our self-confidence, who we are, what we want, really getting clear on what it is that you actually want. If nobody else was in the picture, if you didn't have to worry about anybody else, like what would you do? What would your life look like? And being able to start to very, sorry, slowly and in small ways start to set these boundaries so that you're able to step into the version of yourself that you want to be. So, that can look like I'm not picking up the kids today, or that can look like I'm sorry, I can't volunteer for this 50th committee at school or whatever, right? Like being able to say no to the really little and easy things so that when the big things happen, you've already had that practice. You already start to build that confidence of like, yeah, I don't have to do all this. And you have the proof of like, okay, I said no to joining the PTA and everyone doesn't hate me. So, okay, like that's okay. Like it's okay for me to say no sometimes.
Hmm. And where does asking for permission come in? Because I know in my past relationship, I was always asking for permission and I always got a no. It was like I would ask, I really want to do this. And then it was no. And it was more of a, parent child kind of relationship. And, how do you stop asking for permission from others? Or is that just another form of people pleasing?
I think it kind of is. And I think it can also be a way of not taking ownership for your life, right? Like if you're asking permission and they say no, okay, well, I can't do it. But that means that you get to stay in your fear, right? And you get to stay in your comfort zone. And we know, you and I know better than anybody that like in order to grow, we have to get uncomfortable, and not everybody's ready to do that yet. And so when you're stuck in that place, that's you being in your safety zone, but not taking ownership of the fact that I'm keeping myself in my safety zone. It's his fault or it's her fault or whatever. But starting to recognize that you are the adult in this situation, right? And you get to decide when you give yourself permission to do whatever it is that you want to do.
And I love that question, how old do I feel right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if I feel like that teenager asking for permission to go out, then I'm not speaking from adult Julie.
Exactly. And, and I think that can be a really great tool for people to ask themselves that question when they're aware of any of these behaviors, because I can guarantee you the most adult version of you is not a people pleaser. That is a younger version of you that is popping in. And most of the time, that version has no business being in the situation that you're in, right? Like 13-year-old Julie has no business being in a conversation with a partner, right? So it's that thing of like, okay, I'm recognizing this is a younger part of me. How can I kind of negotiate with myself to allow that part to take a step to the side so that the oldest, wisest, I like to call it the oldest, wisest, most compassionate part of myself can be present and can lead the show.
Wow. So once you decide to stop people pleasing, and loved ones or people who are close to you in the past start hearing that no from you, and they don't all like it. They might call you selfish, or they might flat out say you always do what's best for you.
Right.
How do you handle those former relationships that aren't used to the adult, wisest, most compassionate version of you speaking up for herself, who says, no, that doesn't work for me?
Right. Yeah. And that happens. That's going to happen, right? It's inevitable. And I think, there's a couple ways that it can be handled. I think one, always handling with compassion. This person is used to you saying yes all the time. They're shocked. right? Like there's just coming out of nowhere for them. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad person, that they don't want to hear that. They're used to you allowing them to do whatever that's kind of on you, right? Like
Right.
you have to take responsibility for the fact that for the past however many years, I've allowed this person to do this. And
Mm.
so I think that there are ways to be firm and kind. It doesn't have to be like, oh, this person doesn't respect my boundaries, they're totally cut off for me, right? Like, and that happens sometimes, but more often than not, being able to have an adult conversation with that person and help them to understand, this is why I'm doing this. And this is why it's actually beneficial for both of us, because boundaries are about both parties, right? It's always in the best interest of both parties to set a boundary, whether the other person recognizes it immediately or not. And so being able to have a conversation with them and say, look, this is why this is actually beneficial for both of us and why it's
Mm.
healthier for both of us. Sometimes that works,
Mhm.
sometimes it doesn't. But I think it's always worth a try, because I think what I've seen with my clients and with other people, when we start to set boundaries, sometimes we go like, we're rushing out of the gate and we're just like, no, 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 no to everybody. And then we're like cutting all these people off. And it's like, hold on, like that's not fair to them, right? Like you made the decision last night that you're gonna set boundaries now. Like they don't know that, right? Like they need time to catch up and like get on the same page as you, right? So just sort of like
Yes.
that reminder of like, this is the monster I created. And
Mm.
yes, I'm trying to change it, but I've got to give the other person a chance to get on board with me.
Wow.
Now that I've made this change.
Wow. And what I'm hearing is accountability. Both
Yes.
parts had that agreement, and you teach people how to treat you. So for all those
Right.
years, you showed up that one way, and then suddenly you're like, fuck off. And they're like, wait, what? Like, where did that
Yeah.
come from?
It's confusing, and when people are confused, they get defensive sometimes, or they feel
Mm.
threatened. And it doesn't necessarily, again, mean that they're like, oh, they don't respect my boundaries. It's like, this is new for them. They just don't
Mm.
know what to do. And so giving those people some time. Now, there will be people who are only in your world because they can take advantage of you, right? We know
Mhm.
that there are
Mhm.
takers in this
Mhm.
world, and we do have to be aware of that, but we can't assume that everybody who was in our world when we were people pleasing or when we were giving too much is a taker. They might have just been a taker because we were allowing them to be.
Wow. And how does narcissism fit in here? So, if you're a people pleaser and you might attract people with narcissistic tendencies that make everything about them, can you
Hmm.
explain a little bit about what is narcissism and what causes it?
Sure. Sure. So, narcissism is something that I think gets thrown around a lot. There is like clinically, there is a narcissistic personality disorder. This is not as common as we think. Everybody wants to think that their old partner was a narcissist or, whatever. Everyone's like, oh, definitely, right? They're like reading the description. Oh, that's totally him. That's totally her. It's like, okay, let's chill. First of all, like we all have narcissistic qualities, like
Mhm.
everyone does, right? Like that's just a part of being a human being. We all have them. What creates sort of a narcissistic personality disorder is when somebody is so far to the extreme that they lack empathy. They lack
Mhm.
the ability to decipher the difference between another human being and like this microphone. They
Mhm.
look at people as objects, they look at people as things, they look at relationships as disposable and only for their taking, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this often happens when there's trauma.
Mhm.
When a narcissist isn't just born, in my opinion, people have differing opinions, but from my opinion, you're not just born a narcissist, right? When there's attachment ruptures very early on in life, when there's a lot of attachment trauma, not having the ability to even learn how to have a relationship with somebody. So whether there was isolation or a lot of, you had a really absent parent or a parent who was not engaging or loving or giving any kind of, affirmations to you as a child, you don't ever learn how to attach to somebody. And
Mhm.
so it's just not there, and so these people tend to go through life um, mimicking being in a relationship, right? So they see things and they like a lot of times you'll hear a lot of narcissists when they talk, they're quoting movies a lot. They're quoting books. They watch a love story on TV and they're like, "Oh, I can replicate this," but the feeling isn't actually there.
Wow. Yeah, that makes so much sense. So people have different degrees of it. We have
Yes.
those tendencies, and when they say the world doesn't revolve around you, as a
Yeah.
human, it kind of does.
Yeah.
It's like, this is
Yeah.
my view, my perspective.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's not even just the inability to do so, it's the unwillingness, right?
Mm.
Because there are plenty of people who have traumatic past. There are plenty of people who have attachment issues and all these different things that don't end up becoming narcissists, right?
Mhm.
And it's, I think that there's, that's kind of where the nature nurture sort of conversation comes in, but there's something different that happens for somebody who ends up really being like your classic narcissist, where there's this unwillingness to try to care about other people. And maybe because they never needed to, right? It
Mm.
just depends on the circumstances of their life. Like, if this is working for me and I'm getting everything that I want, then why should I try to do something differently?
Wow. Oh, so much in this. I'm
Yeah.
learning so much. I'm trying to process it all and be the interviewer at the same time. I'm just like, wow, this, it makes so much sense. And, let's say that you are deciding now to choose yourself. And I know you have a program that helps with this. Can you tell us more about that? Say yes to you.
Yeah, so Yes to You is a mini mastermind that I'm starting mid-April, and it's going to be a 6-week program. There's going to be live Zoom calls, group Zoom calls. So we'll all meet together and we will talk about boundaries. We'll talk about people pleasing. There will be some hot seat coaching going on. So, you're coming in with an issue, maybe something happened last week, or maybe you're anticipating a conversation that's going to be really difficult. We can, coach through that, work through that. There will also be daily Voxer support. So there will be support in between calls on the Voxer app for chat or text. And then I'm also offering, I don't usually do this with masterminds, but I'm offering 2 60-minute one-on-one calls with me as well. So that we can really dig deep, really get down into what it is that is holding you back from being able to either start setting boundaries, or how to do it in a more clear, kind, compassionate, but firm way, so that you're not feeling like a mean person when you're doing it. Like, boundaries, it's not an excuse to now become like an asshole, right? Like, it's really about like,
Darn, it's kind
that's
of
not
fun
what we
being an
want.
asshole sometimes.
Right. Yeah. But it's like, that's not what it's about. Right. Like, so I think sometimes people will take that and they'll say, like, well, I'm setting boundaries. And it's like, no, you're just really being rude to people, and that's not what it's
Right,
about. It's
right.
about being firm and clear about, like, this is what I'm available for and this is what I'm not. So
Right.
helping people to navigate through some of those tough times, and then also having the opportunity to dig deep into, where did this start? How is this happening? How old are you feeling when you're doing these things?
Mm.
Let's work on healing that younger part, so that she or he doesn't feel like they need to pop up every time you're in a situation like that. They don't need to be running the show, and sort of doing some of that parts work as well.
Wow. Oh, so good, Nazi. I
Yeah.
love all of this so much, and I'm excited to learn more from you too. You are
Yay.
such a wealth of knowledge. And
Oh, thank
any
you.
last minute wisdom to share with the audience, in regards to boundaries, like if you could put it into one phrase or one word, or, just to kind of leave our audience with something that can help them on their path.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just knowing your worth, right? And it's all about knowing that you are worthy of living a beautiful life. You are worthy of getting what you want. You are worthy of doing the things that you want to do. And it doesn't mean that you doing that is taking anything away from anybody else, right?
Mm.
Like, you get to have the life that you want to live, and it doesn't take anything from anyone else. And you get to be comfortable in that. And I think when people recognize that, they are not looking outward to others as much to get the reassurance that, like, I'm doing okay, or I'm a good person, or, whatever else they're making it mean about
Wow. So many chills. Yes, chills,
themselves.
chills. I'm worthy now. What a beautiful
Yes.
affirmation. I am worthy now. I'm worthy now of living the life I was always meant to live, that I desire. I'm worthy of it all. And no one else has to
Yeah.
be hurt in the process of it. I love that. So in alignment with, everything I talk about with abundance as well.
Yes.
I love it.
100%. It's
So
what brings it
good.
in, right? We need to
Yes.
do, we need to get, that's what brings you into alignment. So then you can have everything else that you want.
Yes. And where can
Yeah.
people find you online?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Nazie Spurrier. I'm also on Facebook. I have a free Facebook group called Manifestation Goddesses. So people can find me on there and join our group. I do free masterclasses, card readings. I always post about my programs first in there. So it's sort of my VIP area. And yeah.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to have the links to all of her groups and her website in the show notes and in the description box below if you're watching this on YouTube. Nazi, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and to share your wisdom with us. We're so grateful for you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you.